I always find it interesting the way the media, the mainstream media, the way they choose to cover stories. Words are very powerful. The way you structure an article, the angle that you take, it can have an impact on the opinion of the reader. It's all psychological. For example, if I said recent polls show Joe Biden's approval rating is 38%. Now, contrast that with recent polls show Joe Biden's approval rating dropped to 38%, a record low. The difference between those two sentences is just three simple words: dropped, record, low. But the difference in the feel, the impact, can be monumental. The first sentence, it doesn't give you any context. Joe Biden's approval is 38%. Let's go ahead and move on. The second sentence, it gives you the negative context. It's a subtle change, it's small, but it can make a huge difference. Now, that's just a simple example, but I bring it up to show you how the mainstream media impacts the overall psyche of the culture. Trust in the mainstream media is at record lows, but that does not mean that they don't have any impact. The methods they use to cover stories, it matters. There are no straight news programs anymore. The days of unbiased journalism, those days are over. Everything is opinion based. Everything is agenda driven. When the media covers stories involving minorities or anyone in a protected class, anyone that fits their twisted narrative, they make it a point to inform you of their protected status. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Check this out from the New York Times. First sentence of the article, they inform you Jacob Blake, a black man, was shot by a white cop. Now that might seem inconsequential. It may seem like those details are minor, but it's not. The mainstream media formulates articles to paint a narrative. Let me ask you this. If Jacob Blake was a white dude shot by a white cop, do you think the media makes any mention of their race? No, because it doesn't matter. But when the story fits their narrative, they go into overdrive to point out those details. I'll give you another example. Take a look at this story from CNN about Trayvon Martin. They mentioned his race, but CNN, they failed to mention the race of George Zimmerman. Why? Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. George Zimmerman is a minority. He wasn't a white cop. He was some private neighborhood watch security guard. They couldn't use Trayvon Martin to paint the police in a negative light. So what did the media do? They used it to promote gun control. Another young black man loses his life to gun violence. We must implement stricter gun laws. Oh yeah, while we're at it, we also need to defund the police. That way, people have no way to defend themselves and no cops to call when they're victims of crime. It will force them to beg the government for a solution, which will be the loss of all personal freedom for the myth of safety. They never let a story go to waste. They shake up the magic woke 8-ball, see what it comes up with. That's the narrative they push. Oh, magic woke 8-ball, please give me wisdom. I want you to promote gun control, my child. Thank you, master. You are so wise. Now, those are just a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. I could sit here for hours and show you how the media tries to influence your thinking. But the reason I bring all that up, I found it rather interesting how the mainstream media is covering or not covering the incident that happened in Florida over the weekend. Kissimmee, Florida, right outside of Orlando, home to Disney World, the land of non-binary Mickey, transgender Minnie, and gender-void Daffy Duck. If you enjoy pride parades, relentless humidity, and roaches the size of Leah Thomas, Central Florida is the place for you. I have been to every major city in Florida, from Pensacola, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Miami. I have yet to find a city in Florida that I liked. I know many of you who live in the Northeast or northern cities, you have this idealized view of life in Florida, but trust me, it ain't that great. By the time mid-June comes around, you'll be begging for January in Philadelphia. But anyway, there was a track meet in Kissimmee, Florida over the weekend. TMZ, they received footage of the event. Watch what happened.
Fucking kidding me! fucking kidding me?
What did you see in that video? I know it happened fast, but rewind it and watch it again. Watch the first 3, maybe 4 seconds. I had to watch it several times myself. What do you see? To me, looks like a black kid taking the fucking head off of a white kid. Now, do their races matter? No. If the roles were reversed, white kid takes the head off a black kid, the shock and outrage would be the same for us normal people. Normal people, we don't see color. We can all agree that this should not have happened. That kid should be banned for life at minimum, probably should be arrested for battery. But what's interesting about this whole thing is how the media is covering or not covering this story. I just showed you a couple of examples of how they cover stories involving a black victim and a white aggressor. How do you think they're covering this one? This morning, I spent a lot of time reading articles, Bleacher Report, Mediaite, TMZ, the New York Post, Outkick, Fox Sports. You know how many times the race of the victim and the race of the attacker was mentioned? 0. None. They used the colors of their uniforms to describe them instead. The runner wearing black attacked the runner wearing white. Turns out the attacker wasn't even involved in the fucking race. The white kid was running. Apparently the other dude was in the track or in the way. So the white kid shoved him or he moved him out of the way. It pissed the kid off and he retaliated. The New York Post was the only media outlet to mention that minor detail. The majority of those sites that I mentioned are generally right-leaning or center-right, besides, of course, Bleacher Report and TMZ, and maybe Mediaite. I can't figure Mediaite out. Sometimes I think they're woke, other times I think they have common sense. Who fucking knows? I don't know. But I'm not criticizing them for not mentioning race here. Like I said, their race doesn't matter. I wouldn't expect it to be mentioned. For the most part, those sites cover stories in a somewhat unbiased manner. But even conservative sites are sometimes guilty of what I'm criticizing the woke media for doing. Look at this from Fox News. This is from a couple of years ago. Jason Whitlock wrote an article for Outkick explaining why George Floyd was not a racial crime. Fox News points out, Jason Whitlock is black. Look, we have a black man saying George Floyd wasn't racially motivated. It must be true. If Tucker Carlson wrote that article or said that, would they point out that he's white? No. Why do we need to point out Jason Whitlock's race? Why can't it just be Jason Whitlock doesn't think this was a racial crime? Things like this seem like it's minor, but what it does, it furthers the divide between us, and that's why the woke media does it. First of all, do you know how many woke media outlets covered this story in Florida? Just take a wild guess. You think ESPN's covering this story? They've sure been spending a hell of a lot of time talking about that fucking parental rights bill in Florida, which, by the way, did you know 53% of Florida Democrats support Ron DeSantis and that parental rights bill? Yeah, it's true. It turns out they don't want their kids being taught to fuck a gender-void lamppost. Like I said, all of this is subtle manipulation, and the reason the media angles their coverage this way is to further the divide. This country has never been this politically and socially divided, at least in my lifetime, or at least it's never seemed like we have been this divided. I think the vast majority of Americans think like you and I do. That doesn't mean that we're all the same. That doesn't mean we always agree. But I do believe we agree on the important issues, on values. We don't want our kids being taught by some woke school system who works 8 months of the year, wants to be paid for 12. We don't want them teaching our 7-year-old to fuck the vacuum cleaner. I think we all agree the color of someone's skin is irrelevant. I think we all agree the sexuality of a person doesn't matter. You want to be gay and marry your husband? Go for it. You want to change genders? Go for it. The mainstream media knows most people Most people agree on the fundamentals, but they have to keep you distracted. They have to keep you divided to further their own agenda. Most people don't have a problem with Will Thomas becoming Leah Thomas. The problem arises when he wants to compete against women. So they push the narrative. If you don't like Will Thomas competing against women, you're transphobic. If you don't think George Floyd was a racial crime, you're racist. They use people like Leah Thomas, George Floyd, to keep you distracted from what's really going on, like Joe Biden wanting to raise your taxes. My home value has risen, I think, $25,000, $30,000 this year. They're trying to push a bill where I would have to pay taxes on those capital gains while I'm still living here. Not selling the house, you have to pay them while you're still living there. Home value goes up every year. You pay taxes on it every year. Are you good with that? Did you even know about it? The media also uses people like Leah Thomas, equity in college basketball, the WNBA. Pick your woke cause. They use it to keep us divided because they know the only way to implement their woke socialist utopia is with a divided population. Remember the 2020 election? How many times did you hear Joe Biden will return us to normal? Has that fucking happened? Joe Biden will lead us to a new normal. But they never wanted to tell you what the new normal was. They invent a problem, push the problem to the masses to where people are just miserable. Then they offer you the solution. And the solution? The solution always has the same results. It results in you being more miserable than you were before with less money and less freedom. But anyway, give me your thoughts on what happened in Florida and the media coverage or the lack thereof. Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys later.